Hello. In this video I'm going to be sharing some reflections on the Gospel reading for the first Sunday after Easter from chapter 20 of John's Gospel. I don't imagine that any of us will easily forget Easter 2020. It's been unlike any we have ever known. Instead of welcoming joyful congregations, our churches have stood silent and empty. Instead of gathering to celebrate with family and friends, we have stayed in our individual homes. Instead of days by the sea or visits to the countryside, we have restricted ourselves to our permitted daily walk in our local area. And all the while there has been a growing sense of fear as the human cost of the coronavirus has become ever more apparent. Welcome to Easter in lockdown. But of course that hasn't been the whole story. There have also been many signs of hope. The breathtaking beauty of spring blossoms and birdsong, the kindness of neighbours, the creativity of artists of every age and skill level, people's willingness to battle with new technology so that they can take part in virtual worship, and the inspiring example of Captain Tom Moore and his sponsored walk, all bringing joy at this difficult time. In the Gospel reading for the Sunday after Easter, we also find joy breaking into lockdown. The writer John tells us that on the evening of that first Easter day, the disciples had locked themselves in because they were afraid. Mary, John and Peter had already seen the empty tomb, but despite, or perhaps even because of this, the disciples feared for their lives. They had only too recently witnessed what their religious leaders, in partnership with the Roman military, were capable of. They were also painfully aware of how quickly they had buckled when things had got tough. Small wonder then that they kept their doors locked. It was into this situation of lockdown, confusion and fear, John tells us, that the risen Jesus appeared. There were no recriminations for the disciples' earlier failure, only words of reassurance. Peace be with you. And as they recognize the risen Jesus, still marked by his scars, the disciples are filled with joy. His presence transforms their situation. There is hope for the future. But Jesus isn't there simply to bring comfort. He also encourages them and gives them a commission. In the power of the Spirit, the disciples are now to continue Jesus' mission to bring the good news of God's love and forgiveness to the world. And if you're familiar with the story, you will know that the disciples are radically changed by this experience. Within just a few weeks, these fearful followers who had locked themselves away are so transformed that they preach in public places, square up to the authorities, and think little of imprisonment and arrest. This gives us great cause for hope, for it is our Christian belief that however dark life may seem, however badly we have failed, there is no situation that cannot be transformed by the presence of the risen Christ. You may already have had glimpses of that presence this Easter as you've appreciated the many good things that we still have. You may have had a sense of a still small voice in the middle of all the anxiety, speaking words of peace, reassuring you that even at this dark time, there is hope of resurrection. Or you may be struggling. Like the Apostle Thomas, you may find yourself seriously questioning where God is at the moment. That's quite reasonable. But at times like this, it's important to stay connected with our faith community so that we can encourage and support each other, even if it is only remotely. I've often wondered how Thomas got through that week between Jesus' first and second appearances. That staying with the group ensured that he too eventually encountered the risen Christ. And just as the risen Christ didn't merely comfort his disciples, but also sent them, so he sends us. And even though our opportunities may be more limited at the moment, he calls us in the power of his Spirit to be Easter people, a community transformed by hope, and to carry that hope into our world. Amen.